Hi, I'm Lily, and before I get into my story, please don't forget to like and subscribe so you can hear more about how I faced one of the hardest nights of my life. This experience completely turned my world upside down, and I'm here to share it with you. Thank you for being here to listen. It all started on what was supposed to be a wonderful evening. The night was meant to be a celebration held at Mrs. Thomas's extravagant home. Her house was stunning, with its grand crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, casting a beautiful, warm light all around. The dinner table was perfectly set, with fine china that looked like it had come straight out of a high-end store, each piece gleaming under the soft glow of the lights. It was the kind of family dinner where everyone was supposed to enjoy themselves, and I was genuinely excited. I had some incredible news to share. Recently, I had been promoted at work, and it was a big deal for me. I had been working hard in my marketing career for years, and this promotion to senior marketing director felt like a huge accomplishment. I remember standing in front of the mirror, making sure my dress looked perfect, smoothing out any wrinkles, and taking a deep breath. I was ready to tell everyone and expected that they would be happy for me. I imagined smiles, applause, and maybe even a toast to celebrate. As we started eating the appetizers, I felt nervous but also eager to share my news. I leaned over to my husband, Adam, who was sitting beside me, and whispered, "I have some great news to share." He gave me a nod and smiled encouragingly, letting me know that it was the right time to speak up. So I took a deep breath, turned to the rest of the family, and with a big smile, I announced, "I've been promoted to senior marketing director." But instead of the applause and excitement I was expecting, the room went completely silent. The smiles vanished, and everyone just stared at me. Mrs. Thomas, Adam's mother, who was sitting at the other end of the table, narrowed her eyes at me. Her lips pressed tightly together, forming a thin line of disapproval. She leaned in towards Adam and, in a voice just loud enough for me to hear, hissed, "Is this what we raised him for? To be overshadowed by his wife's career?" Her words cut through me like a knife. I glanced at Adam, hoping he would stand up for me, but instead, he seemed to shrink under his mother's gaze. The supportive smile he had given me moments earlier faded away, and I felt his hand, which had been holding mine under the table, slowly pull away. Trying to keep the mood light and salvage the moment, I smiled and said, "It's a great opportunity for us, Adam. The raise is significant and will help us in so many ways." But before I could finish, Mrs. Thomas interrupted me. Her voice was sharp and filled with judgment as she asked, "What about starting a family, Lily? Do you really think money can replace the joy of having children?" Her words hit hard, and before I could respond, Adam, who had been silent up until now, joined in. His voice had turned cold, much colder than I had ever heard it. "Yeah, Lily," he said. "When are you planning to slow down and settle into family life? This career isn't everything." I was stunned. My heart sank, not just from the words, but from the betrayal I felt in Adam's voice. This was the man who had always been proud of me, who had supported me every step of the way in my career. And now, here he was, siding with his mother against me. With my voice trembling, I replied, "I thought you were proud of me." By now, the main course had been served, but the joyous atmosphere from earlier was gone. The conversations around the table shifted to other topics, but the tension was still there, hanging in the air like a thick fog. The roast beef on our plates was simmering, but the tension between Adam, his mother, and me simmered even more. Adam's behavior became more and more hostile as the evening went on. Every glance, every word, was filled with disapproval, just like his mother's. It felt like they were teaming up against me, and I couldn't understand why. The people who should have been the most supportive were the ones making me feel small. Then, just as dessert was being served, something I will never forget happened. The waiter had just placed a beautiful piece of cake in front of me when Adam suddenly stood up from his seat. He grabbed his napkin and threw it onto the table with a loud thud. Everyone turned to look at him, shocked by the sudden outburst. "You should know your place, Lily," he said, his voice echoing through the dining room. "You're my wife, not my competitor." His words hung in the air, and I sat there in disbelief. The room, once filled with the warm glow of chandeliers, now felt cold and unwelcoming. I stood up, my heart racing, trying to steady my breathing. Being your wife doesn't mean I have to give up my dreams, Adam. I deserve respect, not this, I said firmly, my voice shaking slightly, but filled with determination. In that moment, something changed in Adam. Before I could react, he raised his hand, and in a sudden flash, one that would haunt my nightmares for years, he struck me across the face. The sharp sound of the slap echoed through the room, freezing everyone in place. The room fell into complete silence as I lifted a trembling hand to my cheek, feeling the sting of pain spreading across my face. All eyes at the table were fixed on me, wide with shock and disbelief, but no one moved or said a word. I didn't speak either. Instead, I turned slowly, pushing my chair back. The legs of the chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor, a sound that felt like it cut through the silence. I began walking toward the foyer, my steps steady even though my mind was spinning. The sound of my heels hitting the marble floor was the only thing I could hear, like the steady beat of a drum marking my escape. I reached for my purse without glancing back, not even once. I didn't need to. I already knew that what was behind me, my marriage, my life with Adam, was over. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my skin, and I closed the door softly behind me. The quiet click of the door closing felt like the final punctuation on this chapter of my life. It was over. My marriage was over. In that moment, standing outside in the dark, cool night, I knew I had to leave. I had to find a place where my ambitions weren't seen as something to be ashamed of, where I could breathe freely and finally be myself again. For too long, I had lived in the shadow of someone else's expectations. Now, it was time to step out of that shadow and find my own way. As I drove away, I watched the house grow smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, a strange mix of fear and relief swirling inside me. I was truly alone for the first time in a long time. But there was something else too, something new, a spark of hope, a sense of freedom. It was small, but it was there, flickering inside me like a light that had just been lit. I knew this was the beginning of a new journey, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The next morning, I woke up in my small apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows. It felt like the first day of a new life, like everything had changed overnight. The events of the previous night still felt fresh in my mind, and yet, at the same time, they seemed distant, almost like they had happened to someone else. My phone buzzed with messages, friends reaching out after hearing whispers about what had happened. Messages of concern, confusion, and questions filled my screen. But I ignored them. I couldn't focus on explaining myself right now. There were more important things I needed to take care of. The first thing I did was pick up the phone and call the divorce attorney I had been recommended. My hand shook slightly as I dialed the number, but I was determined. When the attorney answered, I didn't hesitate. I need to file for divorce, I said, my voice strong. It's urgent. The attorney's response was calm and professional. Understood, they said. I'll prepare the initial paperwork. Can you come in this afternoon to go over the details? Yes, I'll be there, I replied. After hanging up the phone, I felt a small, victorious thrill. There was no turning back now. The decision had been made, and I was taking the steps I needed to move forward. At work, I tried to focus, though my mind kept wandering back to everything that had happened. My boss, Mr. Brandon, noticed my distraction and approached me with a concerned look. Everything all right, Lily? He asked gently. I'm dealing with some personal issues, but I'll manage. Thank you, I replied, trying to sound composed. If you need time off, just let me know, he offered. No, I'd rather keep busy. It helps, I said, giving him a small smile. He nodded in understanding. Well, let me know if you need anything. Thank you, I said, grateful for his kindness. As I returned to my work, I couldn't help but feel that despite the chaos in my personal life, I was taking control. The steps I was taking were difficult, but they were necessary. It was the start of something new, and while I didn't know exactly where this new path would take me, I was ready to find out. I threw myself into my work, finding comfort in the familiar tasks that helped keep my mind off everything going on in my personal life. The routine of my job was a welcome distraction, and my coworkers were incredibly supportive, which made it easier to breathe, even when the weight of my marriage falling apart felt overwhelming. "Hey, Lily, I heard about last night. Are you okay?" Mary, one of my closest friends at work, asked me, her voice filled with concern. "It's been tough, Mary," I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'll get through it." Mary gave me a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you think. And if you ever need a place to crash or just hang out, my door is always open. Don't hesitate to reach out." "Thanks, Mary," I said, feeling grateful for her kindness. "I might take you up on that. How about drinks after work?" "My treat," she offered, flashing me a grin. I smiled back. "That sounds perfect." Later that evening, over drinks, Mary and I talked about everything. I poured out my heart to her, sharing the details of my crumbling marriage and the emotional roller coaster I had been on. Despite all the turmoil and uncertainty, I found moments of relief in our conversation. Mary's presence and our laughter, even if just for a few hours, helped me feel like things would be okay. When I finally returned to my apartment, I checked my phone and saw several missed calls from Adam. My heart sank as I debated whether or not to call him back. After thinking it over, I decided not to. Instead, I sent him a text message that I knew I needed to send. "I've filed for divorce. Please respect my space during this time." I typed and hit send. His reply came almost instantly. It was full of desperation. "Can we talk about this, please?" "I didn't mean it, Lily. I'm sorry." I stared at his message for a moment, my emotions swirling. I knew what I needed to say. "I need space, Adam. Good night," I replied, keeping my response firm but brief. As I put my phone away, I felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over me: sadness, relief, anger, and something else. Determination. I was free now, or at least I was on the path to freedom. There was no turning back. I looked around my small apartment, which was simple but cozy. It was my space, my sanctuary. No one could hurt me here, and that gave me a deep sense of peace. This was where I could start fresh and rebuild. As I thought about Adam, I realized how much his own decisions had led us to this point. His mother's toxic influence had clouded his judgment, and in the end, he had pushed me away. It was sad, really, that he had let himself get caught up in someone else's views, but that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something new stirring inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was stepping into a new phase of life. A phase where I could finally start living again. Tomorrow, I would be stronger, and the day after, even more so. This was just the beginning, and I knew I was ready for whatever came next. In the days that followed, I focused on my career with renewed energy. I threw myself into my work, becoming more involved in larger, more impactful marketing campaigns. My hard work didn't go unnoticed, and soon, my network began to grow as I connected with influential people in the industry. I was invited to host webinars and lead workshops, showcasing my expertise and leadership skills. My career was taking off, and I felt proud of how far I had come. One busy Sunday morning, I was sitting at my desk, reviewing campaign proposals, when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was Amy, a well-known contact in the marketing world. "Hey, Lily," she greeted me warmly when I answered. "Hi, Amy. How's it going?" I replied, surprised but pleased to hear from her. "I've got a project I think you'd be perfect for," she said, excitement clear in her voice. "Are you free to chat about it later this week?" My heart skipped a beat. This was the kind of opportunity one had been working towards, and it felt like the next step in my journey to success. "Absolutely," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the excitement bubbling inside me. "I'd love to hear more." As I hung up the phone, I smiled to myself. I was moving forward, both personally and professionally. The life I was building for myself was full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly excited for what the future held. There would still be challenges ahead, of course, but I was ready to face them. I was no longer the woman who had felt small and trapped in her marriage. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, and I was determined to make the most of every opportunity that came my way. I heard through the grapevine about what you've been going through. I'm really sorry you had to deal with that, Amy said, her voice sympathetic but still professional. Thanks, Amy. It's been tough, but I'm managing, I replied, trying to stay composed. Listen, she continued. I've been thinking. There's an opening for a speaker at a conference next month. The topic is resilience and leadership, and I believe your experience, both personal and professional, would really resonate with the audience. What do you think? The offer caught me off guard. I hadn't expected something like this, but I knew it was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. Speaking about resilience in front of an audience felt fitting after everything I had been through. I'd be honored, Amy. Thank you so much for thinking of me, I said, feeling a sense of pride. As my career continued to grow, so did my reputation. But with that growth, I also began to hear whispers about Adam. His behavior had not gone unnoticed, and soon enough, people in the industry were talking about it. The same people who once respected him were now distancing themselves. At an industry meetup one day, I overheard bits of a conversation between two executives. He's looking for work again, one of them said, shaking his head. After what he did to Lily, who would hire him? The words stung, but they also felt like confirmation that I wasn't the only one who saw the damage Adam had caused. While my career was thriving, Adam was struggling. The roles had completely reversed. He tried to reach out to me several times, sending messages and asking for help, but I ignored them until one afternoon when I received a text that made me pause. Can we meet? I really need your help, Adam's message read. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a brief coffee meeting. I didn't know what to expect, but I wanted to hear what he had to say. When we met, Adam seemed like a shadow of his former self. His voice was low as he began. Lily, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I've lost so much. I can't find work anywhere. It's like all the doors are closed to me. I listened, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt sorry for him, but another part of me remembered everything that had happened. I'm not in a position to rewrite the past, Adam, I said softly but firmly. You made certain choices, and now you're facing the consequences of those choices. I know, but you could help me. You could talk to people, tell them I've changed, he pleaded. I shook my head gently. The professional community talks, Adam. People know what happened. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about the choices you made, and people see that. As I left the cafe, I felt a strange mixture of pity and resolve. Adam was learning a hard lesson, one about respect and the long-lasting consequences of his actions. It was a lesson he had brought upon himself, and there was nothing I could do to change that. Back at work, I threw myself into my projects with renewed energy. My experiences, as painful as they had been, were now a source of strength. I was determined to use them to help others. It was bittersweet, realizing that sometimes the hardest personal trials could lead to the greatest professional triumphs. With my divorce finally finalized, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was like I could finally exhale after holding my breath for so long. This new chapter of my life wasn't just about moving on, it was about taking everything I had learned and using it to fuel my future. At work, my role expanded. Beyond my usual responsibilities, I started a mentorship program for young women in marketing. I wanted to give back, to help others navigate the challenges I had faced, both in my career and in life. My own experiences of overcoming adversity drove me to create a space where these women could feel supported and empowered. One day, during a mentorship session, I met Lauren, a bright and ambitious intern who reminded me a lot of myself at her age. She was eager to learn and filled with potential. During one of our conversations, she looked up at me with curiosity, her notebook in hand, ready to take notes. Lily, how do you handle criticism, especially from people who think you don't belong? She asked earnestly. Her question made me pause. I thought back to all the moments when I had been doubted or questioned, both in my personal life and in my career. The answer wasn't easy, but it was something I had learned through experience. You have to remember that criticism often says more about the person giving it than about you, I told her. There will always be people who think you don't belong or who doubt your abilities. But it's up to you to prove them wrong by staying true to yourself and your goals. Don't let their opinions define you. You belong where you are, and the only person who needs to believe that is you. Lauren nodded, a thoughtful look crossing her face. Thank you, Lily. That really helps. I smiled, feeling proud not only of the progress I had made in my own life, but also of the impact I could have on others. This was the new chapter one had worked so hard to create, and I was ready for whatever came next. I smiled at Lauren, encouraging her. You listen, you learn, and then you let your work speak for itself. Never let someone else's doubts become your reality. Instead, use those doubts as fuel to work even harder. Lauren nodded, quickly scribbling down notes. But what if it gets really tough? She asked, looking up at me. Then you reach out, I said. Lean on your network, find mentors, and never be afraid to ask for help. We're stronger together. I emphasized the importance of having support during challenging times. The mentorship program wasn't the only bright spot in my life. My social circle had also grown, and I was often invited to speak at industry events and social gatherings, where I shared my story and the lessons I had learned. At one such event, a networking dinner for top marketing professionals, I was approached by Scott, a former colleague who had heard about my recent achievements. Lily, I have to say, your talk was really inspiring, Scott said with admiration in his voice. How do you keep pushing forward after everything? It's about not letting your past define your future, I replied with a nod, accepting his compliment. Every challenge is just another stepping stone to something greater. As the evening went on, our conversation shifted from casual talk to a deeper discussion about potential collaborations. Lily, have you ever thought about writing a book? Scott suggested. Your story could inspire so many people. The idea intrigued me. By the end of the night, I had exchanged contact information with the publisher, who was also at the event. It seemed like every social interaction was opening new doors for me, a clear sign of how far I had come. I couldn't help but feel proud of the progress I had made, both personally and professionally. As I continued to grow in my career, my confidence soared. I was leading workshops, running marketing campaigns, and becoming a voice for resilience and empowerment in the marketing world. Each speaking engagement and workshop wasn't just about sharing my knowledge, it was about healing myself. I was turning my past pain into lessons for others to learn from. After a long day filled with back-to-back events, I lay in bed one night, reflecting on just how much my life had transformed. I was no longer the woman sitting silently at that dinner table, suffering in silence. I had become a leader, a mentor, and a survivor. I had taken the difficult moments of my life and turned them into something meaningful. This wasn't just a new beginning for me. It was a vibrant continuation of a journey that I was proud to call my own. Months went by, and the memories of my past with Adam had faded into the background, overshadowed by the busy and fulfilling life I was living. I was focused on my future, and the echoes of that time were barely a whisper. But one afternoon, during a coffee meetup with Isabella, a mutual friend, those old echoes came back to life. Lily, Isabella began cautiously, Adam's been asking about you. He's really struggling, says he regrets everything. I sipped my coffee, letting her words sink in. People often regret things when they start to feel the consequences of their actions. I replied calmly. He wants to talk to you, maybe apologize. He seems sincere. Isabella continued, looking at me with a mix of hope and concern. I thought about it for a moment, but then shook my head. Isabella, I appreciate you telling me, but that part of my life is over. I've moved on, I said firmly. There was no room in my life for looking back. My focus was on the future, on the new opportunities and relationships I had built. Isabella nodded, understanding the finality in my words. We quickly changed the subject, leaving the past where it belonged behind me. Despite Adam's attempts to reach out through messages and calls, I had no desire to revisit that chapter of my life. The truth was, I had already come so far. My life now is full of promise, and I was surrounded by people who supported me and valued my growth. I wasn't the person who had once been trapped in a relationship that stifled me. I had become someone who embraced challenges, who thrived in the face of adversity, and who was determined to keep moving forward. Looking back, I realized that every struggle I had faced had shaped me into the person I was today. And as I stood at the forefront of my career, leading with confidence and empowering others, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready to face whatever came next with no regrets. I stayed firm in my decision to keep my distance. Each time Adam tried to reach out, I remained silent. It wasn't out of anger, but because I needed to protect my own well-being. Through my journey, I learned how important it was to set boundaries and respect myself. In the months that followed, my career continued to grow. I spoke at conferences, led exciting marketing campaigns, and saw my mentorship program flourish. The impact I was making felt real and fulfilling. Sharing my story on different platforms inspired others who were also facing their own challenges. One evening, as I reflected on the past year, I realized how much I had changed. I hadn't just survived, I had thrived. My life was now filled with purpose and success. Knowing that Adam regretted his choices wasn't something that gave me satisfaction. Instead, it reminded me of the serious consequences of disrespecting others. As I closed my journal, which was filled with plans and reflections, I felt a deep sense of peace. My experience with Adam had pushed me onto a path of empowerment and achievement. My victory wasn't in his regret, but in my own strength, turning pain into power and living a life based on my own values. As we end this story, I'd love to hear from you. Do you think Lily was right in cutting Adam out of her life? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.